in your windows. We are coming to you today from Bryan Head, Utah. This is a picture along the Colorado River on the way to Bryan Head, Utah.
Not the Colorado River, but Eagle River.
Oh, okay. We're with our son, who demanded kind of that we go with them and move his whole household, and we are part of his household. We're part of the pandemic pod. We help with school with the kids and etc.
Other stuff.
He was moving his household for a month or almost a month because they can all work virtually and we can too. So you're coming with us. So we were almost a week in Vail, Colorado. We've now stopped halfway. We're in Bryan Head, Utah, we're at the halfway point going to Indio, California.
Yep. So we're going to go from 11,000 feet to 13 feet below sea level.
Yeah. And this is Denver Botanical Gardens, which was a joy at this time of year. If you haven't been to a botanical garden in the winter, you really should go. And right now is a great time to go because given the many people who are not coming and the fact that you need to wear a mask and buy your tickets ahead of time and tell them what time you'll be there, we pretty much had the gardens to ourselves. There might have been
100 people in the total garden.
Spread out over acres and acres. So they have beautiful views. They have one of the views at the end of the view was a Chihuly glass, which might look like that can't possibly be real life. But when you look at Yucca rostrata, you go, yep, by George, it can actually look like that. Wouldn't we like to grow that? Those of us who don't like yuccas all that much in the world think, boy, that's neat. And yes, I could grow that in zone 5-6, but would we want to? No. I've mostly been watching our grandkids. I can't even tell you how high up they were on a ridge and how far down I was as I took this picture, but watching the mountain goats, I think my son was right. The kids needed something different. They've not played with other kids for so long that even though there's 4 of them, they really needed other things to do.
And that was at Arches National Park.
So that's where we are. And sorry for taking the time, but we like to make sure since people are interested.
So good morning and welcome to Weekend Walkabout in our gardens and yours virtually.
We're coming to you from gardenataz.org. I'm Janet McConovich.
I'm Stephen Nicola.
And our topic today is how to simplify to keep on growing. We call it Defy Age as you work on your garden. That's me examining a winter witch, a fall witch hazel.
That's often Janet's look in a plant, either
yes,
in bloom or trying to find out what it is.
Yeah. And Steve does most of the photographs. And
that's often my look.
And with us today is our daughter, Sonia Nicola, who is a professor at University of Toronto. So she's a year plus into understanding how virtual teaching goes. So she's a great person to have helping us monitor the chat and do the questions and answers. But she's also an excellent gardener in her own right. And quite often when we look at the chat, at the entirety of the chat when we get done, we found that she's given the same answers to the questions that we were going to give anyway. Yeah. So she's a wonderful person, and thank you for coming here, Sonia. So you'll hear her speaking off and on, which reminds me that you may want to also find the place when you open your chat window. There's a little menu that says where you can save the chat. You may want to save the chat because quite often those of you who are here with us, and we'll ask you today to do that, contribute some pretty good information.
Did we lose control?
Yep. We've been gardening professionally for just about 40 years now, enjoying it. We have a good time being professional gardeners. We're kind of cutting back now, but
we are cutting back on gardening
and going more into the writing. We have books like Designing Your Gardens and Landscapes and Caring for Perennials. But mostly we're working on writing now in our own website, gardenataz.org. But I know a lot of you know us because we wrote in Michigan Gardener. We've written in the news. So we've been around for a while. And I think that's where a lot of you know us from. Some of what you'll hear about today, you'll be able to go to our website and go into our search field. And it's a pretty good search function on our website. You put a word in here and the articles will come up. There's thousands of them up there.
Yeah.
So we have 3 chapters today. We're going to break it up into 3 parts so that it's a little easier when we put this recording up for you to go back and find what you might want to find in part 1, 2, or 3. We're starting with the U part of simplifying. And that means that we're starting on our outline, which we've already told you is in the chat. You can click the little blue link to get it. But we're going to start up here at the top of the outline. We try to go in order. We're looking for ways that you can save yourself. So save on the time and the energy that you spend and the money that you spend on your garden. even as you get older and your abilities change. And we're there with you.
We're moving right along.
We started this particular path when I was the middle picture there about 10 years ago. Just about 10 years ago, we had a lot of people who were asking us, help us if you can to make this garden easier for me to work in, because I want to keep gardening, but I'm getting to where I can't do things. So we started helping other people and looking for ways that we could help other people.
And trying to figure out ourselves as
how
it's
to
going
do that.
along.
Right, because we're making this trip ourselves. There was Steve when we got started, literally when we got started. That was the year that we started the business. It's been a little bit.
No, I didn't have gray hair then. That's a little bit past that. No, I did not.
Oh, okay. Well, a little bit of gray on his beard. It used to be easier for me to get him ready to be Santa. It's easier now for me to get him ready to be Santa, which he likes to do in the wintertime. And I started from my usual place, as my friend Margaret Thiel used to call me on a radio show, Professor. I started with looking at the numbers, at how long it takes to do things, and whether we could work on making it less time for people in the garden so that they spent less time out there. Don't worry about those numbers you just saw. Those of you who take notes, they're on the notes if you need them, and I'm going to talk about them for a couple minutes here. The way that our numbers have shown in keeping records on clients' gardens, and also talking to other professional gardeners over the years. We talk to professional gardeners at public gardens and interview them. For 100 square feet, which is outlined there on the top left, for 100 square feet of lawn, if I take all the time that you spend on that lawn, that needs to be spent on that lawn, watering, clipping, fertilizing, aerating, if you do that, raking leaves, and spread that and add up all the time for the season and divide it by the months of the season, which for us is about 8 months of people working outside. It's 8 minutes a month to take care of 100 square feet of lawn. The same amount of space in an area that's ground covers and shrubs and maybe some trees is about 12 minutes a month.
Once you start getting into the annuals and perennials, the time increases. On an annual bed, it's usually 15 to 20 minutes a month.
And that's 100 square feet of annuals. For the same space in a perennial garden, it's an hour a month, 60 minutes a month. And we started keeping these numbers back in the days when we started our business. And the word was, mostly in catalogs and in magazine articles, that you put in perennials so that you had low maintenance gardens, so you could plant them once and not have to keep planting them. And those of us who took care of perennial gardens knew that that was not the case.
That was
that it did take more time, and it takes a lot more time. So those numbers are written down for you in the outline, or if you wanted to keep track of them right now, just put in your head that lawn is 8 minutes a month and perennials are 60 minutes a month. And everything under perennials, everything other than perennials, is a lot less time. Right. So we looked and said, well, let's look at how much garden people have. Let's look at how much garden there is at Catherine's house and say that, well, her front room is about 225 square feet, and that front room is about the same size as that space where the patio garden comes underneath the tree and around the patio. So this is 225 square feet. You can, of course, measure it if you'd like to, but it's wonderful to have Google now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a cool application.
Yeah, how big is my garage? How big is my garden? How big is my front room? How big is my garden? Some municipalities even have a thing where you can take a little tool and outline an area on your plot, and it will tell you how many square feet that area is, which is pretty cool.
Technology.
You'll have to look at your own township or community or city website, and it'll have that in your building ordinance area. Now, given that that's an average time, we've taken the whole time for the year and divided it up. And we took the whole time for the year. We literally just took all the time for the year.
And we kept records.
Yeah, and yes, we had to, because Steve was always disputing with me how long something was going to take that we were doing.
And she was always right.
Because putting it on a bill meant that you had to estimate how much it was going to cost ahead of time. So when we added all that time up and divided it, and it included our time to buy things like string and stakes and mulch and plants and get them to the garden, we found that was the average, but everything needed more time in the spring and a little more time than the average in the fall and less in the summer. And that means that everybody needs more time in the spring. They need more help. And so the first thing that I started doing, being professor, is I said, here's how much garden you've got. Here's how much time it takes to take care of your garden, to do all that needs to be done. And at that point, people that I was working with would gasp and fall over, which was not a good thing to do. But I said, what we need to do is get you more help in the spring. And for those people that we knew and for ourselves, we knew that there's always people who say, I don't know what to get you for your birthday.
Yeah.
So we started telling them, show up here on the first Saturday in April.
And give me an hour and a half, 2 hours of labor.
Give me some help. I've got some things that are going on. So what we want to do, and Sonia will ask you to pull this up because, you know, we've failed almost every time to pull up a poll efficiently. If you could pull up the poll, you can participate or not in this poll, but we'd like to know where you are on this place, because from here, we went elsewhere to look how to simplify gardens.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to know where you are with this particular look. So we have a poll for you, which is, I think there are 3 questions, there might be 4. If you'd like to participate, you can roll down through them, and this is all anonymous. And you can just click on, tell us if you know how big your gardens are and how long you've gardened. Those kinds of things we'll give you. So we'll share those results so we can take a look at them together and see who we are. So we're looking at just barely, but we're up there with, we've got some pretty big gardens, about 1,000 square feet. And there are people that don't want to know and have no idea. And
I like those.
Yeah, it is a pretty,
nice.
It's a pretty common thing to have happen, actually. And most people, it looks like, have gardened for enough years that we know what's going on, especially all my life and 30 plus years.
30 plus, yeah.
So that means that, well, I'm not going to do the math, but if you take a look at the number of participants that are here and think that people are, that over half of them have gardened for 30 plus years, oh my gosh, that's thousands and thousands of years of experience here. So when we ask a little while later for some suggestions, you're going to get some pretty good suggestions, and we're going to want to know how to save your chat. So you want to look at your chat screen. Yeah. And we are up there, most of us, those of us who will get up on a Saturday morning and spend time in a webinar, we know are the, well, we used to be called the seniors. And then this last year, we keep getting called elderly because of the comorbidities of, and I think it's awful that we're called elderly because we don't feel that way. And many people are trying to simplify, so good. We've got a lot of commonality here. And I'm glad that there are people who are thinking about it, because it is something that we need to get going. So you've seen the results. We're going to capture. Okay. We'll just.
Don't worry, I captured them already. We're all set.
Okay. All right. So we're going to close our window that says that we're looking at a poll. All right. So going back to those results, and we'll do that in a little bit. We will go back to those numbers again, or I will use them while we're talking again. I'll go back into where I started this from, which was, okay, so the numbers say get help in the spring. Steve and I have, I won't say preyed upon, because I just said it. We have looked to the children in the neighborhood for generations now, starting with our own and their friends. If we needed help, we would ask them to help. We didn't make them help. We just asked them if they would
tried not to make them help.
And after our kids grew up, then there was another group of kids, and then a second group of kids. This is from the middle group of kids, Sydney and Mackenzie helping us at the zoo garden. The kids liked to be in our garden because the garden is more interesting than just lawn, and we would eventually ask them, can you help us do some things? And they would do that. Cody helping us plant bulbs at the zoo. Cody is a grown-up guy working at a veterinary office now. Yeah. So that's where one of the places we would get help in our own gardens. And we would also choose to have help with particular types of work. I'm not smiling in that
grimacing.
Picture. I'm grimacing because working a power post hole digger is it's a chore. It's a piece of work. Those are the kinds of things that you want to be able to ask people to help you with. So if you've asked someone, whether it's kids in the neighborhood or friends, come on over and help me when I really need the help. If there is something you don't like to do, you need to ask them to do that. Most gardeners, I've heard them do it, and they've told me when they're asking us for help in the garden, they'll say, oh, I can't ask them to do that. Yes, you can.
That's the point. That's why you asked help. It was you want to do what you want to do in your garden.
Yeah, and that's very important that you do that. But sometimes you have to hire people to help in the garden. A lot of times we have to do that. And we do ask people to be cautious as you do this and spend your time wisely. There are people who say, oh, I found this guy who can help us out, and he charges just $15 an hour. Well, that's good, but be wise about doing this, because you don't always save money doing that. And it is expensive to do gardening. We know that, and we have the numbers for
Yeah.
that too. So we put the numbers down. We don't want to talk about them today because they're not the important thing.
Right.
But that 100 square feet of perennial garden can cost between, well, now we're a little over $300 as an average over the year in labor, and close to, and we can definitely go over that $300 in plants and
easy.
materials.
Yeah.
So we're going to be spending money, and so you'd want to say, oh gee, I don't want to spend much money for help, but be careful. Our neighborhood kids, there's Bobby and Cody walking away with the wheelbarrow, and the key thing in this picture is Ward watching the boys. Ward had told us, you know, I really can't do most of this stuff anymore. I shouldn't come to help. I said, oh, Ward, you have to come and help. When we bring inexperienced labor, we need eyes on them all the time. They're gung-ho, especially when you tell them things like,
It's going to build muscle.
oh man, those boys just start, and Bailey, they start shoveling more when you tell them that. So they're gung-ho and they're helping, but somebody needs to make sure that they don't bury the plants, and that they are doing what we ask them to do.
They're not lifting it up so it's dumping into past
Over
the fence,
right?
You know,
I mean, there are all kinds of things like that need to be done. So when you hire for less money, then you lose the ability to do what you want to do in the garden. So do think about that before you get to it. And another place where people tend to go and spend money is on power tools. What we've learned is they might save time, but often the power tools don't save any time at all. They do save muscles.
muscle stress, sometimes, and they could cause more muscle stress with the vibration.
Yeah, myself, I don't like to use power tools because I don't like the vibrations in my hands, but we've done things. This is one of the times when Steve happened to be there to take a picture, but on several occasions with my friend Deb here on the left, or my friend Sherry, who both use power tools more than we do. We've put my fork in the middle of a hedge. We measured the hedge, and the fork is right here with a string tied on it. That's marking the place where I'm going to cut the right side. Deb's going to cut the left side, and she's using a power trimmer, and I'm using hand shears. And we're both going to use the same process, which is to shear and then thin this hedge, which we do once a year on this hedge. At this time of year, before things break bud. It's the most efficient time to do this kind of work. So I'm clipping by hand, Deb is clipping with the clippers, and we're working our way around the hedge, each of us doing our own area. And when we're done with the clipping, then we're going to thin, which you need to do when you're shearing a hedge. Look at our pruning videos to understand what this is about. But we need to go over it with hand clippers to take some growth out further down into the hedge so that new growth is coming from many levels inside the hedge. When we get done, so there's Deb clipping, we're done at the same time. And this has happened a number of times with power tools. The difference is, in this case, Deb, using two hands with the power trimmer, couldn't do what I did with the hand shears, which is keep scraping the cuttings off as I'm working on them. So
another thing, Janet always uses a tarp and tries to throw as much debris as we can, and other people just throw it out and then rake it up. We think that that's more efficient, having it in one spot, if you could do that.
Yeah. So what we find is that the cutting there wasn't a time saved in the cutting, but the cleanup, a little bit of time saved in the cutting, but the cleanup then took longer because you had to go through and take all those little pieces out that are just going to end up looking bad as they dry up, and also cluttering the inside of the plant, stopping light from getting in and keeping growth coming from inside. And so we do this hedge just once a year. Once is all we cut it. This is what it looks like in July. And it doesn't go beyond that. You saw at the beginning of the picture what it looked like in the spring. It's still, the growth stays even. It's nice. We've cut it down far enough to let it grow up that far. And that's all.
And you don't have to shape the U to look like a meatloaf or a meatball. You can make it look somewhat natural like this.
Yeah, these are Ward I use, and they're meant to spread like in a low vase shape.
And they're meant to be about as big as that hemlock back there.
Yeah. So we generally use hand tools, which means we're looking all the time for the most efficient hand tools. Well, from this point, from looking at numbers that we had and having people tell me, and so many people tell me, I've tried, Janet, and I can't, because what gardeners do is they save themselves some time looking at the types of gardens they have and saying, okay, I'll close up that perennial garden and turn it into ground cover, or I'll close up that garden and turn it into lawn, or as soon as they save themselves time, they go right back out and spend that time doing something else outside, because what they want is to be out there.
Sorry. Yep.
So, okay, so there must be something else. So at that point, we looked for some other perspectives from gardeners who'd been doing this for a while and who were continuing to garden, and said, yes, we made it simpler. I said, how did you do this? Why did you do this? We found 15 gardeners. At that point, we were looking for people over the age of 70 still gardening. Most of our gardeners were well over 70. And we started with my friend Burdette, who I met back when I first started gardening and was selling at the Pontiac Oakland Farmers Market. And Burdette continued to garden professionally, growing and selling her plants well into her 90s. At this point, she was 89 years old when we started this, but I'd met her at the farmer's market when and many of you who've stopped at the Pontiac and Oakland Farmers Market would remember her for her dried flowers and her things made out of sheepskin. When she retired up north, Michigan, she continued to garden professionally for a number of bed and breakfasts and restaurants, decorating for them, and gardened right until the year that she passed away last year. Just a wonderful gardener. So I asked some questions of Burdette and ended up going around the state of Michigan and a little outside with Burdette and Steve, talking to other gardeners about why you do this, how you do this, what you can suggest to other people. This is Burdette's place when she retired up north. And that was let's see, she was 91 that year, with her daughter-in-law Shannon and great grandson there. Oh, no, grandson, that's right, that's Peter's son. Yeah. We talked to 15 people. You don't need to know their names, but you might recognize some names here. We talked to them and asked them all the same questions. Those 15 gardeners had 900 years experience, so you can gather that their age is up there. And they told us, when it came to perspective, 5 things that we're going to tell you in this chapter right now. They're outlined on the handout just to let you know that they're there with detail under them. And it started with, they said you need to keep a good perspective. And there's some details about what they said. What we did with their interviews is I took, Burdette and I did the interview, and I kept all the notes, and then we went over the notes and said, what did people tell us in general? We wrote down what they told us in order of the most times that they said things we put first. And one of the things that they all told us, like Marge Alpern here said, is we don't own a garden. You have to take the perspective that it's not my garden. The garden has a life of its own. It's going to do its own thing. And you need to understand that and accept that, so that you're not thinking that you have to be in control all of the time. And you have to accept what Frank, most of the time that we knew Frank, he was not on a walker, but at this point he was in a walker. Yeah. And he said, this is a way of life, and you need to get out there. If you can take that and say, this is what I need to do. What's most important is that I can still get out there and do these kinds of things. And that it does literally make your heart beat faster to look at gardens and look at green things. That's been scientifically proven, that people, that your blood pressure goes down, that your heart rate steadies, that your alpha waves increase in your brain just to look.
Recovery rooms and hospitals are using green pictures.
Yeah, to help people recover. So if you can say that, and that I just need to be out there. I love my garden. It's got its own life, and it's a child. I can't abandon it. Then you can take on the main idea, which is don't fret. Just stop worrying about what you're doing. Enjoy that you're out there. Forget that you don't know the names of the plants anymore. I keep forgetting names of plants. I was so glad last week that Cheryl and Pierre came to the talk and could help us with names of plants. It doesn't matter if you know the name. They're your friends already. You just want to appreciate every day of the season. This is Burdette's growing area in her basement up north.
Starting her seeds.
Always starting seeds, and always finding a place for every single one of them. At one point, taking them and dropping them off at people's houses like a baby in a basket. Yeah. Just to watch things grow, even a weed.
She would come down there and smile.
Okay. Oh, now, Stephen, you told me you were going to cry. You can't, because some of these people who are so good to us are no longer here. But, the whole idea is that, so now we know we want to get out there, and we want to know how, because our body is saying no, that we want to go. Well, the thing is, you don't stop. You don't even stop in the winter. Don't ever stop. Ginger is a wonderful gardener and still maintaining, this is a one-woman garden. She sometimes has her grandson helping out, And when she gets big things planted, she has the nursery bring them in and
Yeah.
put them in the hole that she digs. But this is over 2 acres, and it's just Ginger working on this. And after 2 heart episodes, and it's over 80 now. Also important with perspective was don't feel bad telling people how you want things done. Make sure that you can say out loud, here's what I'd like you to do. But at the same time, accept that they won't do things like you would. As Virginia said, who gardened with us till she was 101. She was out there pruning with us. She said, don't be such a perfectionist. Now, understand that these people are the same as you and me in that Virginia said, don't be such a perfectionist, accept that they'll do it. And yet she called her son one day, because she always kept a list for her son who came by once a week. We came by every 3 or 4 weeks. And once a week, he would come by and take her to-do list. And she told him one day that on her to-do list was cutting down her arborvitae hedge by the front entrance because it had gotten too tall. This is after the cut. And he said, oh, I'll bring my chainsaw. And Virginia went, oh my gosh, no, you can't use a chainsaw on my arborvitae hedge. So this hedge that you see cut right here, Virginia did. And you're looking at the year that Virginia cut this hedge. You can see the big stubs that she cut out. And this picture on the right is after the cut. Virginia knew that it would grow back as long as the stubs that she left had just
some green on
because
it.
there was a little, even the little new stubs that are just coming of green, she knew they would grow back, but she wanted clean cuts and at a certain level. This is the after it's growing back on the right. So she, even though she said, don't be such a perfectionist, she ran out there and did that herself.
Yeah.
But she also told us, lower your standards. I loved it. I realized I've been fighting that weed for something like 50 years. And recently I realized it's very pretty. The plant she was talking about at the time was the bishop's weed. Okay, don't put your fingers up in a cross in front of us or whatever. This is a plant that does exactly what it's supposed to do. It covers the ground. And it's pretty. And yet people put it in and then say, oh, the darn thing.
It runs everywhere. Well, it was a ground cover.
It's supposed to run everywhere. And we were looking at this area and she said, we have to do something there to save those irises. I said, we don't have to save the irises. We need to take the irises out of there, or we need to put blinders on and stop thinking about the irises. Let them die.
And it's a cool combination.
Yeah. I said, that's meant to be ground cover. Let it spread. Let it fight it out with the perennial geraniums over here. And the hostas are big enough to get up above it. Let that go. It's still pretty. It's a ground cover. If we want the irises, if they mean something special to you, then let's dig a couple of them out. We don't need 30 of them. Dig a couple of them out, clean the roots well to make sure that the bishop's weed ground cover, also called snow on the mountain, doesn't move with it. And we can put them in a space where you can keep them as irises growing like they should in a more controlled garden. The same thing happened to a certain extent at Burdett's house on her hill up north when I would go up and help her with that area up there. There's the bishop's weed on this side. And it had jumped to the fence, it had jumped the line. And I said, let's do this, Burdett. Let's not bother weeding the bishop's weed. Let's let it grow where it can grow, how it will grow on that side of the path. And say, let it go. Stop trying to weed out there. Don't worry that other stuff moves in with it. It's a ground cover area. Let's establish the idea that from this edge of the stone to right here where I'm clearing out, that's garden. And beyond there is not garden anymore. It is
background.
It's the wild stuff. It's the background. And we need to draw those lines somewhere. We ended up having to take rocks and put them along that edge to say, stop here, Burdett. This
because
is
she wouldn't.
We did this at the same time earlier, the same way earlier for a client who said, I'm retired now. And Dottie said, Jack and I want to play golf and I got too much garden. Every time I closed up part of Dottie's garden, I would come the next time and Dottie would have opened up a new garden. She was one of the people that teaches us these things. So what you want to do is watch your plants and see what does well. Plant a lot of what does well and let the plants fight it out. He calls it, Will, choosing your weeds. We call it see who wins.
See who wins.
Plant them and see who wins.
Yeah.
And one thing in terms of perspective that none of the gardeners said for me to write down in my interview notes, but all of them demonstrated to us, is the way to keep gardening is shrink your home garden, not make it bigger again, volunteer with some other group somewhere. Because all of them were doing that. All of them were at a park, a nature center, a community garden. Catherine there, the second one from the left, a retired special ed teacher, garden with a group called On My Own,
Yeah.
adult special people who had a community garden, and she would garden with them. So that was her garden. A number of people, I think our average age gardening at the Detroit Zoo was, that one year we figured it out, 63. And that included Kari's kids and Dawn, who's younger than the rest of us. But you know, the average age is an older group of people, and you get people like Ward and Lorraine on the left with their vests on, who had said, we think we should stop coming. We said, no, keep coming, because not only can you help us with supervising the kids, but what you can do, and the whole garden and everything, all the accomplishments, what it looks like, it's all of ours.
Yeah.
Each of us doing what we can do makes a beautiful garden. So every single one of the people we talked to was doing that, helping someplace else. I don't know why that one's black.
Huh.
And then from there, they told us some things that were specifics. And what we've written down in this group is specifics to you, to what you need to do, that they all said. Sit was one of the things they said. Rest, get a stool, a bucket, anything. And know your limitations. Know how much you can do.
Virginia said she could do about 2 hours.
Yeah.
She'd be out and the mail lady would come by. And one time Virginia wanted to finish something and knew the mail lady would tell her your time is up. And Virginia went and hid till the mail lady went by and then came back out to finish it.
Yeah. So they know what they can do. But what you want to do, I don't know why. 1 second here while I see if I can make this go away. I don't know why our screen, we're missing a little bit of our screen, so we can't quite read exactly what we want to see. Okay, I can't get rid of it. So you want to be out there, and you want to do things every single day. So do them, which means that you have to exercise. All of them said, now Burdette, this is Burdette's exercise sheet. You can tell she's had it for a long time and used it along. Every day she would exercise. The others didn't necessarily say that they exercised. Marge did yoga. Frank did his exercises. But most of them said you have to get out there and keep moving all of the time, which is why at 89 in this picture, Burdette could still reach down to the ground and do this kind of thing. I looked and I said, boy, that's just like Phil there in his 60s, and Mackenzie, not even a true teenager yet, can bend down and do those things. You want to still be able to do that, and that means you need to keep moving every day. I will say, however, that despite the fact that she's able to reach the ground and she did exercises every day, this is not the right way to bend. And you need to know that, and that you need to bend your knees, not your back.
Especially people with prone to back problems.
I learned this very early on. I learned because I carried, that's my daughter in the top, that's Sonia in the top left in the carrier. And I didn't want to give up gardening even with the kids were little. I would go out and garden with them. And I found out very quickly that if I bend the way
like
that
this,
the kid ends up in the mom in front of you. I mean, we had that happen. And now I'm carrying the grandkids around while they're older, and I'm not carrying them anymore.
Maybe Bree, we still could.
But I used to hurt my back before we had kids. I would do things for too long and I'd end up with a sore back. Since I learned not to bend where a kid would fall out of a backpack, my back doesn't get hurt.
Yep.
So if
and
you
her family has that back issue sometimes.
Yeah. So if you don't understand about backs and you're not sure you're bending right, imagine you've got a kid in a backpack, and if you're bending and that kid is going to fall out, then you're bending wrong, and start bending your knees more. Burdette would come out past her garden here, past that front garden with the daffodils blooming there. You can see them blooming in the middle background. She'd come out every single day, past that garden, which was mostly ground covers and bulbs, past the garden that's shrubs and ground cover. They don't need much, just let them grow. Ignore the vegetable garden down the side where she loved to do things, but it's okay. We don't have to do that very much. Vegetables are like an annual garden. She'd walk down the path through and to this garden on the side of the house, not even visible from the road, not even visible for people walking out. She wasn't doing this for anybody else. She was doing this for herself, because this is the garden she loved the most. Because she, no matter what season of the year it was, saw in it her flowers. And that's what she gardened for. So exercise so that you can go out there every day and do what you want to do. even if other people don't see it when they look at your house. Now, as a for instance here of the things and the perspective and how that fit into this, this is a lavender hedge along the walkway going out to her garden. There's that walkway, and there's that lavender hedge, which at one point when I was out there with her, it was, when was it? Time of year, real early in the spring, I think is when we were, yes, it was real early in the spring we were out there. And I said, you know, Burdette, we really need to take this hedge. This hedge has got grass growing all over in it, and it needs to be cut back. We really should, to make this easier, make this grass area lawn. This lavender area on this side where the dog is looking could be lawn. But Burdette said, oh, I can't, you know, I can't, it gets overwhelming and I try not to let it bother me. I said, well, I'm here right now and it bothers me. And I know that you do see the grass in the summertime and you're pulling that grass and you don't want to be doing that. So let me lift the lavender. I'm going to lift it up, cut out the dead pieces. I'm going to clean the grass out of the bed and put it back in. And this is what it looked like. So if you have a decrepit lavender that's not been cut back for a long time, what you're going to do is cut back the worst branches. So it's now going to be much thinner. I've cut back the parts that had dead and split bark on them and left the liveliest parts. And some of those parts where it was long enough, I've taken them and buried them in the ground as well as putting the roots in the ground so that new growth comes up. And already in the first year, that's what it looked like as it came up and filled out, and it filled back in again. The best thing to do would have been to say, keep the lavender on this side.
Yep.
And use the walkway as an edge for lawn and let the lawn come right up to it. But if you have something that you can't just give up, that's the thing to sick somebody else on, because that's not what you want to spend your time doing. They all said sit. They said sit every time you can sit. And I remember hearing a interview with a man who is at his 100th birthday was asked, so what do you attribute your longevity? And he said, I never stood when I could sit. I never sat when I could lie down. And that was his answer. And I think that's probably a good answer. Thanks, Lois and Verna. And working on that garden, once we talked to Burdette about what we're going to do, Burdette sat. Even Debbie sat.
Yeah.
Virginia would, she swore by that type of walker to give herself a steadying hand. But after 2 hours, I would say, it's been 2 hours, Virginia.
You need to sit.
And we'd either bring a chair or she'd roll out with the wonderful rolling walker with a
Chair
seat on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she'd spend 8 hours with us outside. Another thing they all told us, and we knew ourselves from the paths at the zoo, is make them wider and make them firmer.
No soft edges, no holes in the middle.
Yeah.
It has to be firm completely across.
Which means that you either have a path that tells you how wide it's supposed to be, or you know to put your spade across the path and say this path is supposed to be as wide as my spade.
Yeah.
Jermaine knows that, for instance. I'm trying. I'm working on that, she said. And I said, this back path, Jermaine, by the middle of summer, the path is not there anymore. In the springtime, you need to make that path even wider.
So that you could.
So that the plants have room to grow out to the edge, but not onto your path. I know, she says. I know. And that's why if you can afford to do it, make hard paths, not mulch paths, not dirt paths. Make paths that hold their own size
And are level that you could rely on.
Yeah, because Burdette's son, and I made the mistake the other day of saying that it was Peter. It's not Peter, he didn't do it, it was Tim. Made this path for her in the garden. And she laughed about it. She said, I'm working on getting it out of there because it's totally impractical. It's too narrow, the plants cover it no matter what you do. It's too uneven, you can't walk on it. She said, that's the kind of path, the path that Sam, her husband, put in for her. That's the kind of path you need to have in a garden. So what questions do you have about you and perspective now? We're just about on.
Yeah, we don't have too many questions starting up just now, but I did want to, Carol couldn't stay, but she wanted to offer some book recommendations that I thought I would just note. Gardening for a Lifetime, How to Garden Wiser as You Grow Older by Sydney Edison, and The Right Size Flower Garden by Carrie Mendez. And I wanted to assure people that recommendations like this, including some of the exercise videos that people are recommending, that we will put into a chat transcript and disseminate afterwards.
Right.
Well,
and that might take us a little while to do a chat transcript right now, just because we're moving around a bit more. So if you want the information immediately, what you want to do is visit this recording. We'll put that up this week. or find that place in the chat box where you can save file. It's either a ... menu where it says save, and you can save the chat as we go along.
Great.
Okay.
Unless we have discovered, unless you're on an iPad, in which case, grr. Christy has just asked, there was a small pick of loppers, including a ratchet. Could you give more advice on a purchase there?
Yes, we'll do tools coming up here, but that ratchet type lopper that you saw there was a Fiskars tool, Fiskars. And we do like their engineering and the way that they put things together. They have a ratchet lopper. They also have a power gear lopper, and they are both wonderful tools.
They both work.
Especially the short handled lopper.
Just the short, it's only about that long.
We'll show it again.
Yes, we'll show it.
We'll show it again.
Okay. And then just the other question that I got in is Carolyn was curious about how big are your gardens right now? And you know that my spatial assessment skills are negatory. So about how big are your gardens now?
Well, our gardens that we left just 5 years ago now were about 15,000 square feet. We now, we're working on entirely different gardens, and we're right where all of you are, except that we've undone a landscape first in order to do a landscape. So we've spent 3 years undoing a landscape and laying out new beds. We are going to have, and we have right now, about 3,000 square feet of garden in that we'll call garden. We also have some big areas that are ground cover and shrubs.
We don't consider that quote unquote garden. To some respect.
Well, we do, but to a certain extent, they're not things that we're going to worry about. They're in the heavy shade underneath trees. And boy, they are easier.
They're easier maintenance.
They just took us a few years to get rid of all the things that were not easy in there. So that's what we have of our own gardens. But we garden for people who have the same kind of spaces that you guys are indicating. 1,000 square feet of garden as an average, many with more.
Great. And then otherwise, I think people are really just enjoying and engaging with their own experiences with how to manage themselves and manage their garden. So yeah, I think we'll carry on.
Then we'll move on and say that that's it for chapter 1 in simplifying. And we'll thank Sonia for putting up a note that says that we are looking for subscribers to keep us going with this. In this season, we have viburnums coming up next week, then gardening and allergies, then easiest and best perennials. And at the end of April, this season ends, and we're signing people up for our next season. We're so glad to have your support, and we need it. So if you enjoy this, tell your friends about it. You can come as you please, because we record everything.
Everything, public, private, they're all recorded.
Yeah.
Subscribers get it.
Okay. At any rate, so we're done with chapter 1.